I apologize, Robbie. I didn't mean to scare you. Folks, we are now getting started a little late, and I about scared my assistant to death there. I do apologize. Some people do that on purpose, but I try not to. And I want to welcome everyone to Civil Justice Full Committee today, and thank you for your patience. It's a little late start, but shouldn't take us too long. Madam, or Ms. Robbie, if you would, take the roll, please. Or Madam Clerk, I apologize.
Representatives Bricken, Clemens, Curcio, Eldridge, Garrett, Gillespie, Griffey, Harris, Littleton, Ogles, Parkinson, Ramsey, Russell, Smith, Stewart, Vice Chairman Jernigan, Chairman Farmer.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thanks so much. Members, anybody have anything they want to talk about or make any announcements before we get started? All right, seeing none. We have a calendar today. We have 2 items on that calendar, and was just informed that item 2, House Bill 1472 by Representative Ogles. He's asked that that be rolled for a week. Members, do we have any objection to that? Seeing no objection, we're going to roll House Bill 1472 to next week's calendar. With that said, that leaves us one item left, and that is Chairman Zachary's House Bill 1867. Sir, you have a motion and a second on the bill. It looks like I have 3 amendments here. Which one would you like to move forward with?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. We're going to move forward with drafting code 013342.
So you got a motion and a second on House Amendment 13342, and you're properly recognized. Does that amendment make the bill?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. If you want to go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Yes, sir. So, members, this is a collaboration between the Department of Health, Governor's Office, Speaker's Office, Tennessee Hospital Association. This legislation, in the simplest explanation, simply protects and preserves every possible job we can related to our frontline healthcare workers regarding the CMS mandate that is pending. This simply says that anyone that submits for a religious or medical exemption, it must be accepted. There are certain stipulations. A medical exemption has to be signed by a physician, and related to Title VII regarding the religious exemption, a written statement has to be provided, and that's all that's required for a religious exemption. It simply says those must be granted, and just to provide clarity, this is only applicable if there is a CMS mandate. No CMS mandate, this is not applicable. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Very good. And before I open it up to members of the committee, just want to, as I understand it and I've witnessed, I know you've worked hard on this piece of legislation. You try to involve and listen to and take into consideration all the stakeholders' concerns. Would it be fair to say that you feel like you've addressed all those concerns and this is an agreement upon everyone involved?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, again, this has been truly a collaboration between Health, Governor's Office, THA, which has been great to work with, the Speaker's Office. This is a collaboration, and this is the final piece to that collaboration in this amendment. Yes, sir.
Very good. Members, anybody have any questions for Chairman Zachary? Representative Stewart, you're recognized.
Just as a central premise to the bill, what this does, it allows people to avoid vaccination under certain circumstances for the COVID-19 vaccine. Is that right?
Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, this bill allows those who have a religious or medical exemption request that have been submitted to be granted that for COVID-19.
Representative Stewart, any follow-up?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman. Doesn't the COVID vaccine contribute significantly to preventing the spread of COVID-19 in the workplace?
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, not according to the director of CDC on August 5th that said the vaccine does nothing to stop transmission.
Representative Stewart.
On August, you say the CDC's position is that the COVID-19 vaccine does nothing to stop transmission of COVID-19?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, on August 5th, and you feel free to go to my Twitter account. That video is posted there.
Well, I can't go to the video account at this moment. Obviously, we may revisit that. I'm surprised at that because I think most medical professionals think that the COVID-19 vaccine is not different from every other vaccine in the world. All the other vaccines prevent transmission of illnesses, and it's surprising the COVID-19 vaccine does not carry that same quality. I think that I think the problem with this bill, and I'd just like you to comment on it, is that it essentially allows anybody to get out of having a vaccine, and what's going to happen is you're going to have people go into nursing homes and other places of business transfer COVID-19 to people, and as we saw up in Sumner County, you're going to have a whole bunch of people die because of it. Is that really a good public policy for this state?
Chairman Zachary, you
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'll go back to the CDC director who said that the COVID vaccine does nothing to stop transmission. The definition of vaccine was changed because of the COVID vaccine, which would leave you to believe this is more of a therapeutic than a vaccine, and that's the reason we continue to have to get boosted. And to say that this is like other vaccines, it is not. This is an mRNA vaccine. This is the first time in the history of our planet that we have mass vaccinated with an mRNA vaccine. This is nothing like the flu vaccine or any other vaccines. This is the first time this has been done in history, so this does not correlate to any other vaccine. And again, the CDC, which has been lifted up as the gold standard, simply said on August 5th that it does not stop transmission. And I'll further point out that many of these healthcare workers who do have a medical reason for not getting the vaccine, and many have a religious objection, what's not being taken into account is the fact that many of them have already had the COVID virus. And according to the CDC, on January 19th, I believe, I've got that written here somewhere, January 19th or January, let me see, Mr. Chairman, make sure I get the right. Yep, January 19th, the CDC report came out that said natural immunity is 6 times stronger than any immunity and protection from the vaccine. So just going by the CDC and what the CDC is saying about this so-called vaccine, it does nothing to stop transmission. So if that does nothing to stop transmission, then these healthcare workers who served for a year without the vaccine now have had a year to get the vaccine, and if they have a medical or religious exemption, many of them are being denied. And Mr. Chairman, I have a spreadsheet here full of those who have been denied their religious exemption, which could technically be a violation of Title VII. And so we're simply coming in and reinforcing Title VII and then adding additional stipulation, which is consistent with the CMS mandate, and that's been vetted by our legal and drafted in a way that the Title VII, EEOC, and the ADA have all been taken into account, and this is compliant with the current CMS mandate.
Representative Stewart, did that answer your questions?
Not really, but I appreciate the sponsor. I won't belabor the point, but since we're here and you're mentioning this, what religions have come out with a statement stating that they don't support vaccination? Is there one?
Chairman Zachary, you recognized.
Thank you. As I said in subcommittee, those are questions for pastors and priests, and I'm neither.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm giving you the opportunity to tell us one single religion that supposedly is backing these religious exemptions, and I'm hearing you say you can't identify even one. Is that fair?
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
No, what you're hearing me say is I'm not a pastor or priest, so I'm not going to comment on various religions, because I'll speak for myself as a Christian. It's about a personal relationship with Christ, and it's about personal convictions. It has zero to do with religion. It has more to do with relationship and personal conviction, which would drive me, if I were in this position, to submit for a religious exemption, because many of these vaccines contain aborted fetal tissue for the testing, so that would violate my religious moral compass and has nothing to do with religion.
Representative Stewart, any follow-up there?
Yeah, I guess to me, if it was really true that there were significant religious exemptions, I would think you'd be able to identify a single religion in the entire world that had come out with an official statement to that effect. But I didn't want the opportunity to pass without giving you that opportunity. I just think this is a bad bill, and what you're really doing is you're signing on to this make-believe foolishness about the danger of the COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccine is one of the most amazing scientific achievements that's been accomplished by humanity. It's saved thousands of lives in our country. And to continue promoting this notion that we should limit or restrict vaccines, it's injuring people in the state of Tennessee every single day. So I'll be voting against your bill.
All right, Chairman Zachary, any follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to point out that our state constitution, even more than our federal constitution, specifically mentions right of conscience and personal liberty. And so we as government, especially the federal government, you talk about local government, state government, federal government, all three are different conversations. But for the federal government, for the first time in its history, to mandate a vaccine, it's never been done by the federal government. It's always been done on a local or a state level. And again, if Congress passed a bill, completely different conversation. But for us as government to say, no, you don't have a right to exercise a religious exemption, we haven't seen a statement from X church or X religion is irresponsible and is not good government. And so I think it's important to point out, Mr. Chairman, that supporting this bill is standing with our healthcare workers. It's also standing with Tennesseans to ensure they receive the quality of care they expect, because not only have we moved beyond the crisis phase, according to Administrator in Knox County, we're beginning to move to a critical phase where we have staff shortages that are not able to meet the need. So a vote for this bill is a support for our frontline healthcare workers, and really thanking them for all they've done, and saying we value your job and we value your personal right of conscience and personal liberty as defined in the Tennessee State Constitution. A vote against this bill says we don't stand with you or value your right of conscience or your personal liberty that's referenced in the Tennessee Constitution.
Very good. Next one, we'll have Representative Ogles. You recognize, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the sponsor did a good job. Question on the bill.
All right. Questions
Oh,
been
no,
called?
take that back. I see there's other people
Okay,
on the
the
list.
question that's been withdrawn. Who's next on the list? Representative Garrett, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Zachary, for your work on this. If I could vote for this bill twice, I'd vote for it twice. And here's why. What's make-believe is that, one, this vaccine is a vaccine. If people want to get the vaccine, they should have that personal choice to do that. I cannot appreciate your effort more from what you've done in your district and beyond all Tennesseans. You've even put out there for everyone to contact your office, regardless of your district or not, if they've been denied a medical exemption or denied a religious exemption. I applaud you for that effort, and I'm glad you've brought that list to this presentation today. I know of one person in my district that lost her job from St. Thomas Hospital, which I think is an atrocity, for what I would believe would be a medical exemption that should be beyond medical exemptions, because her doctor couldn't tell her what this would do to her disease that she's suffering from that took her 18 months to get to that diagnosis. And so the make-believe of this is when we have an argument that says, one, that this vaccine is non-transmittable. When we have the director of the CDC, the President of the United States, and others that says 6 months to 8 months ago that that's exactly what this vaccine does, and it's exactly the opposite. And so for a one-size-fits-all mandatory vaccine that does not what it says it does, according to our government, is an absolute failure of our federal government to even say that a vaccine of this caliber would prevent me from transmitting to you if I'm fully vaccinated. It's an absolute disinformation, make-believe that one, masks even would prevent someone from transmitting this vaccine. And it's become political theater for what this vaccine should do, which should be a process for folks to say that if you want to save your life, if you want to make sure that you're protected as much as you can be, that you can fight this vaccine, then the vaccine is probably appropriate for you. That's what this does, right? It keeps people from having a severe reaction to COVID. COVID attacks people in different ways. The vaccine would help you fight that off. Unfortunately, it's not going to prevent you from spreading it if you should get. It doesn't even minimize it. You have said that today, and I appreciate you making clear the make-believe that's out there regarding what these vaccines do and what they do not. And it's unfortunate that people fall in the trap of having to take something, place something in their body to decide whether or not they can work in Tennessee. And in Tennessee, we do not stand for that. So, again, if I could vote for this legislation twice, I would do it. Chairman Zachary, I appreciate you bringing this difficult legislation, and I also appreciate you collaborating like you did with all stakeholders to make sure that everyone here today, including our hospitals, our medical professionals, et cetera, have signed on to the bill, or at least support the bill to make sure we get this passed, this very important piece of legislation. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman
And to
Zachary,
the sponsor.
you're recognized for any follow-up there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one thing I'm just going to mention since we're kind of going down this road is the fact that we have walked through this for 23 months. We've now reached the point where, as of about an hour and a half ago, Massachusetts announced they're lifting all restrictions, lifting mask mandate. Yesterday, New Jersey, Delaware, Connecticut, New York, not in schools, but New York announced the lifting of mask mandates. We've got cities, blue cities, run by Democrats, so we'll talk bipartisan here. The city of Denver announced they are removing all restrictions related to COVID. According to the Telegraph, an article they published on February 1st, that is simply the CDC numbers they've collaborated and put in a graph. I'd ask you to go look at that. The infection fatality rate and case fatality rate for COVID is now less than it is for the seasonal flu pre-pandemic. Let me say that one more time. The infection fatality rate and case fatality rate for COVID is now less right now than it was for the seasonal flu in 2018. So for the federal government to step in now, when we are certainly on the backside, even Dr. Fauci yesterday, for whatever you think about Dr. Fauci, says this is coming to an end. We've reached the end of the pandemic. Now the federal government is going to step in and hammer our healthcare workers with a mandate. It's absurd. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. And next on the list, I have Representative Smith. You recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, sponsor, and thank you to the coalition of individuals that have come to the table and made a good policy. Just for the record, vaccines, whether your immunity, whether it's received passively through or naturally through having the disease or acquired through a vaccine, neither one of those ways of immunity prevents you from transmission. So you basically, vaccines train your immune system to respond less violently, more under more controlled conditions. So it is not a prevention for transmission. However, it certainly reduces the likelihood that you're going to have other sequelae. So just know that that's true, but also understand that, I'm waiting for the Attorney General to complete their study. Back in August of this past year, I asked for an official Attorney General opinion because the conflict that we're still having to legislate around, and I thank you, Chairman Zachary, for saying after this is, an employer has a right of private property, but each of us has a right of medical informed consent. So whether I get my ears pierced, whether I get a tattoo, whether I get an organ transplant, I have medical informed consent. And that's what this is really all about. There is a constitutional conflict that we're going to continue to have to legislate around if our Attorney General doesn't officially opine. And so just know I applaud you for continuing to make lemonade out of lemons and doing a great job doing it, and I will be supporting your bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Zaki, you recognized.
No additional comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Very good. Next on the list, I have Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chairman. And I'll go on the record again saying that, I am, personally against forcing anyone to put anything into their bodies that they don't want to put into their bodies. However, I do also understand, the greater good of our communities and citizenship in trying to beat this virus, which is why I chose to get the vaccination, and it was a choice that I made. I just want to start by saying, my colleague, I will not call his name because I don't want to be called on again, but he spoke on some of the misinformation that's out there, and it's absolutely true. I look at him though. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and there's been misinformation. There was one piece of misinformation that where an individual said ingesting or injecting bleach while laying on the beach in sunlight would cure the virus. Misinformation, right? And there's been a whole lot of other misinformation. And so I understand and agree, but I hate that this has become a political issue. Seriously, because I have many friends who and family members, well, not my family members, but many friends, well, some family members of mine actually, that have lost loved ones, that people who have died, either because they did not get the vaccine or they had pre-existing conditions, when they caught the virus, and they will never ever, their voices will never ever be heard again, and so I think it's important that even if we pass this legislation out, that we still make sure that people understand, don't take this virus lightly, because you still can actually die from it. The other thing I want to point out is that hopefully, we are turning the curve on this pandemic. I truly hope and pray that we are, but we've seen that these other strains are still popping up, and they are. And so, some of these strains, are more deadly than others. Some of them are, might give you just regular cold or flu-like symptoms. But I don't want us to minimize this virus to the point that people don't take it serious, because it's still very, very serious. And lastly, I want to ask, with the present posture of the bill as amended, are the hospitals still good with you?
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm going to say, I won't use the word support, but I will say good, because this was a collaboration with them. And so I'll say good with the amendment. I won't put support in their mouths, but I'll say good with it. Yes, sir.
And perfect choice of words. And I do appreciate that, that they are, at least not put into a bad situation, in regards if we're going to pass this bill out. Last thing I want to touch on is, are we still just stating what the federal government stated in their language in our bill now, so that we can say that we said it instead of them?
Chairman Zachary.
And I'm glad you asked the question again. So we actually discussed that in sub, and I made light of that. So what we're doing is part of especially related just to the religious exemption, we're reinforcing Title VII, which is federal. We're reinforcing that, but we're taking it a step further, requiring that when that religious exemption is submitted, that it's accepted. And so we drafted language where we're ensuring compliance with Title VII, reinforcing Title VII, but then also making sure we're compliant with the CMS mandate, and then taking it a step further that is prohibited by the CMS mandate to require that religious exemption.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, sir. And so with that step further, that acceptance still has to be based on the CMS language. Am I correct?
Chairman Zachary.
The acceptance of the religious exemption would be more Title VII, but the legislation as a whole is compliant with the CMS mandate.
Representative Parkinson, any follow-up?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just so I'm clear, a hospital doesn't have to accept it simply because it was submitted, but they can accept it based on the language that the federal government has in place, correct?
Chairman Zachary.
This legislation for the state of Tennessee will require any medical or religious exemption to be approved for COVID-19. Now, it is only applicable, we talked about, I think it was before you came in, this is only applicable as long as there is a CMS mandate. No CMS mandate, this is not applicable. CMS mandate, this is applicable. So, for example, where Tennessee and 15 other states have filed to vacate the CMS mandate. The CMS mandate, there's a stay put on that by the lower courts. This is not applicable. The Sixth Circuit picks it up, reverses that. This becomes applicable. The CMS mandate's back. This bill becomes applicable. So it's kind of that we follow the pendulum of the swinging CMS mandate.
Okay, and so I just want to be absolutely clear. So if I say I have I'm putting in an application for a religious exemption because I worship hats, and so based on this legislation, if it's passed, does the hospital have to accept that?
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, are you making that statement that you do?
No, absolutely not. Some might think I do. But
just to clarify,
right.
no, within this language, and it's in the language of the bill, it has to be a sincerely held religious belief, and then there's a definition for that. So the worshiping of hats would not be a sincerely held.
It might be sincere to me.
It may be sincere to you. Yes, sir.
Just a quick follow. And so, but that's still the CMS language. Am I correct? That sincere religiously held belief.
Right. Chairman Zachary, you're right.
That would be more Title VII.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
you.
Very good. Next on the list, I have Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Zachary, for bringing this legislation. I have a Carhartt manufacturing plant in Benton County, and we're very grateful and appreciative that Carhartt has a facility in Benton County and provides great jobs for our citizens there. And I think Carhartt is probably appreciative that they've got a lot of good workers that show up for their plant. But I have gotten more and more emails about this when the hold is put in place and then removed, and then Carhartt said they're still going to require people to show proof of vaccination or whatever. So my question is, if we pass this legislation, Carhartt says we're still going to require vaccines or proof of vaccines or something. Will the employees be able to submit a statement to Carhartt and says, I have religious objections to getting the vaccine because of, it's our understanding it has aborted fetal tissue as part of the clinical trials or whatever use. Therefore, I have a religious objection to taking the vaccine. Will Carhartt have to accept that and be prevented from taking any adverse employment action against a Carhartt employee if they provide that statement? And I'm talking about just a written statement on a piece of paper from the employee. I object to taking the vaccine because it has aborted fetal tissue as part of the manufacturing process. Therefore, I am not going to take it for my religious beliefs. Is that going to be sufficient for protection for the employee?
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, so what you're describing, if I understand correctly, what you're describing with Carhartt, that would actually fall under the COVID protection bill that we passed back during a special session. The only exemption we provided in that bill that we passed back in October was related to the CMS mandate. There was a path for exemption that would go through the comptroller, which that's not what we're talking about here. That would be for federal contractors. So right now, and we appreciate Carhartt being here. I have a Carhartt coat. Thank you, Carhartt. But we need to be really clear that whether it's Carhartt, whether it's Kroger, whether it's Target, all companies I have been involved in conversations with since October, if they are requiring proof of vaccination as a condition of employment, they are in violation of Tennessee state law. This bill only pertains to anybody under the CMS mandate because that was the only carve-out within that bill. So we provide a cause of action within the legislation that we passed. I don't know what section of code it is. It's under TCA 14, but it's on page 17 of the bill. Page 8 provides the definition of the prohibition, and then page 1 gives you the definition of adverse actions related to the bill. So I would encourage anybody that has experienced that violation to consult an attorney.
Very good. Representative Griffey, any follow-up, sir?
Please, thank you. And thank you for that explanation. So if Carhartt is still saying, well, I'm not going to accept your piece of paper, then they need to get with their union or their attorney and pursue legal recourses against Carhartt. And I believe there were some provisions for a collection of attorney's fees if someone has to bring an action to protect their employment rights and so forth. My other issue I wanted to bring up is related to the vaccines and the boosters and everything. It's clear they are definitely saving lives, particularly those that have comorbidity and at a risk due to the COVID vaccine. And it's unfortunate that we seem to be split here in America, kind of picking at each other rather than, in my opinion, we should be focusing on the real culprit here, which is the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, and seeking redress from that government for the damage that they've caused America and Americans and so many American lives and damage to Americans. While the vaccine is clearly effective, I don't know if we fully know the cost benefit of the vaccine because it only took the 108 days for the FDA to review all the clinical trial data and approve the vaccine. But when a number of renowned epidemiologists and doctors have sued pursuant to a FOIA request seeking to review that clinical data and have an independent review of it, the FDA and CDC are, stonewall it and say, it's going to take 55 years for us to go through all that stuff and provide it to you, which I submit is simply unconscionable. I also want to point out to the fact that a major CEO of a major life insurance has reported that there's a 40% increase in deaths among 18 to 65-year-olds, non-COVID related, for the third quarter of 2021. That should scare the you-know-what out of everyone. If 40% people died, and there's really no other cause that I think anybody can logically report to or point to other than the implementation of these vaccines. And if we've had a 40% increase in deaths do the vaccines, somebody needs to be put in jail because that was not conveyed to Americans. And we do have a constitutional right not to accept or consent to any medical procedure that we disagree with. We have a fundamental personal constitutional right to refuse medical treatment. And I'm extremely disappointed that so many Americans have seemed to have forgotten that, ignore that, and are not interested in protecting that fundamental constitutional right that we all have. So thank you for bringing this, Chairman Zachary. Sorry to get on my soapbox, but I felt like it needed to be said, so thank you.
And thank you for that, Representative Griffey. Chairman Zachary, any follow-up?
No, sir. Thank you.
Very
Mr.
good.
Chairman.
Next on the list, I have Representative Stewart.
Yeah, I just wanted to readdress this issue about, and I'll just give you an opportunity to comment, about the idea of transmission, because I think we're talking past each other and people are watching. Right, I think you would agree, Representative Griffey just made this point. I mean, the fact that these vaccines prevent people from getting COVID, that the vaccines are effective, that's not controversial, right? And the point is, when people don't get COVID, then they don't transmit it. So the reason that we're coming out of this pandemic is because of the mass vaccination of people. Isn't that all not controversial? I think that's just clear, right? And
Chairman
that's why we
Zachary.
don't want to discourage people from getting the vaccine, because it's the getting the vaccines in our community that is driving the COVID numbers down and preventing people from being injured or killed by COVID.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Representative Stewart, I'm just going to quote the CDC director from August 5th. It said the vaccine does nothing to stop transmission. You can still have the vaccine and pass COVID to someone else, whether they are vaccinated, whether you are vaccinated. That has no bearing on transmission.
No, but I've looked at that. I haven't been able to find the quote. Maybe he's talking about somebody who gets COVID even if they have the vaccine, but the point is the vaccine prevents people from getting COVID in the first place and thus prevents the spread of the vaccine. That's why if you look at the CDC website, they say that all vaccines are safe and effective and reduce your risk of severe illness and reduce the spread of the disease. I'm reading right off their website. I mean, isn't that well, aren't you saying, well, if you get COVID, then the vaccine doesn't prevent it from spreading? Maybe that's true, but that's not really, I don't know. But that's not really the important point. The point is, when people are vaccinated, they don't get it in the first place, and then they don't take it to the nursing home and kill a whole bunch of people. Isn't that what we want in this state?
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Representative Stewart, we could go round and round and round, which we are doing right now. But the CDC, I'm not even going, you know what? Actually, yeah, well, why not? Why not? Let's just walk down that road. Give me just a second here, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, I'm looking at the CDC website, so that's what I'm reading. off of.
Representative Stewart, if you would be
Fair enough.
recognized before we,
I'll withdraw.
thank you.
Give me once.
Question's been called on the bill. Excuse me, on the amendment. On the amendment. We're on the amendment. Question's been called on the amendment. He was. Will you withdraw that, please? Thank you. I'll let him finish answering that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if the CDC, which has been lifted up as the gold standard, which that is questionable, if the words of the CDC director are not enough, let me provide you with multiple entities that I'm not going to go through each quote from each one of these individuals, but unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, during this pandemic, many of our experts that we have relied on and looked at from institutions like Yale, Stanford, Brown, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, unfortunately, those voices have been marginalized, and we think that just the CDC is the experts, which is unfortunate. But if we don't want to listen to the CDC, which I'm all in favor of, we can look at Dr. Harvey Risch from Yale. He is the most cited epidemiologist in the world. Dr. Scott Atlas from Stanford, medical policy expert. Dr. Andrew Bostom from Brown University is an epidemiologist. Dr. Marty Makary from Johns Hopkins. Dr. Martin Koldorf from Harvard, who's an epidemiologist, infectious disease outbreak expert, and Dr. Jay Botticelli from Stanford, who is an infectious disease expert. This is a bipartisan list, and all of those are in agreement with the CDC that the vaccine does nothing to stop transmission. I did not go to Yale. I did not go to Stanford. I went to community college, so that's why I have to listen to these particular experts. And so if you have hard data to refute the experts, if you have hard data to refute Dr. Rish's claims and Dr. Rish's work on the vaccine and the inability of the vaccine to stop the spread, I'm all for it. Bring it out. Let's roll through it. But I'm going to go with not only the CDC director on this one, but also those experts that is a nonpartisan list that I have cited. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stewart, do you have any follow-up? Any more questions you'd like to ask Chairman Zachary?
Yeah, I think we've both made our points. I tell you, I don't think any of those people, and I'm not able to look them all up right at this moment, I really don't think the statement that I'm just reading straight off the CDC website that vaccines work is really something that scientists disagree about. And I just think the problem with your bill is it's a way of trying to allow people to get out of having a vaccine, particularly healthcare workers who can then go in and spread it, and that will kill people. So I just think your bill is not a really good approach, and I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Chairman Zachary, any
No,
follow-up?
sir.
Chairman Curcio, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move previous question on the amendment.
Very good. Previous question has been called properly. On the amendment, all those are in favor of adopting House Amendment 13342 to House Bill 1867, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now we're back on the bill as amended. As I understand it, the amendment made the bill. Any questions? Chairman Curcio, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move previous question on the bill.
And previous question has been called on the bill. Any objection to that? The question's been called. Any objection to previous question on House Bill 1867 as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor of sending House Bill 1867 to Commerce Full Committee, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. No. Ayes have it. Bill moves on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Yeah, thank you, members. And that brings us to the conclusion of our calendar. And I appreciate everyone's participation today. I know it was a hot topic. It's a subject that's controversial all across this country and this world. But I do appreciate everyone's comments and concerns. And with that said, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Very good. And I'll see everyone next week, same time. Thanks so much.